From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2018, these are the Ham Nation headlines for Wednesday, July 6, 2016. Field Day is supposed to be all about emergency preparedness, extreme weather on both ends of the spectrum, from raging wildfires to torrential rains, kept radio amateurs busy with the real thing. We have team coverage.
We've all heard the horror stories about field day miseries. But what about when a raging wildfire forced evacuations from a site? That's what happened to the Albuquerque DX Association. Bob Norton, N5 EPA, explains.
There's just way too many uncertainties. The evacuation orders were lifted only on Thursday before field day. When most field days start setting up on Friday, that's not a whole lot of window.
A raging wildfire was burning about 20 miles from Albuquerque. The wildfire was bearing down on the Cedro Peak Group Campground.
A couple of days after the fire started, they closed that entire ranger district down. So we reluctantly passed this year on conducting our own field day.
With some help from Mother Nature, firefighters were able to get the upper hand on the blaze.
Fortunately, on Wednesday and Thursday before field day, there were some pretty decent afternoon thunderstorms that parked right over the fire burn area, and that made all the difference in turning around that particular fire.
In the end, all wasn't lost on this field day.
We had invites from other area clubs, and others just chose to stay home and operate a little field day from the home station.
For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Kent Peterson, KC0DGY.
Meanwhile, in flood-ravaged West Virginia, Hams awaited word of an emergency activation.
Severe storms on June 23rd caused unprecedented flooding in West Virginia, resulting in 24 deaths, with homes, businesses, entire towns being destroyed. Governor Earl Ray Tomblin declared a state of emergency in 44 of West Virginia's 55 counties. The president made a federal disaster declaration in 8 West Virginia counties. Amateur radio operators have been ready and willing to assist, but so far, communications channels remain open. Earlier this week, WV8JS and Kanawha County ARRL Emergency Coordinator Jason Means, W8KTM, helped install an HF and VHF amateur radio station in the National Guard Charleston headquarters to be ready to provide any emergency communications which may be needed in coming days.
They want a fail-safe system, and of course we all know that the only fail-safe system that we know about is amateur radio.
N8 SFO, ARRL West Virginia Section Manager.
Some of the local Aries group, we have them on standby for any help needed. Just hope that people will reach out any way they can and help out any way they can. We need to help our neighbor.
For the Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Jim Dameron, N8 TMW, reporting from Charleston, West Virginia.
For Brandon Nilsson, KD8ZEI, a mechanical engineering student at the University of Akron, what started as an independent study project morphed into a field day launch of another.
In his school assignment, Brandon chose a Morse code beacon weather balloon because, well, what ham can resist incorporating amateur radio into their schoolwork? He programmed an Arduino microprocessor that allowed the onboard transmitter to send in CW the words W8UPD weather balloon, bearing the call sign of the University Amateur Radio Club, of which he is president. First mission accomplished. Then came field day, and Brandon had even bigger plans. He wanted to launch another weather balloon, this one carrying a crossband repeater, which he fashioned out of 2 Bofong HTs. He programmed a Raspberry Pi to take photographs every 30 seconds and save them to an SD card. Then, as field day launched, so did the balloon. Brandon told Amateur Radio Newsline, quote, "I figured field day would be the best day of the year to launch since the repeater would have the most likely chance of being used with all the activity," end quote. It worked. He told us his farthest contacts were 15 miles north of Detroit, Michigan, into Ontario, and also into Warren, Pennsylvania. As for the balloon, it eventually made contact, too, with the Earth, and was located on the ground in Sugar Creek, Ohio. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Stephen Kinford, N8WB in Wadsworth, Ohio.
Finally this week, celebration and sadness. Newscast number 2018 begins Amateur Radio Newsline's 40th year. It was Bill Pasternak, WA6ITF, who started us all off and kept it going until his death last year. Through most of that time, Dave Booth, KC6WFS, was there too. Sadly, Dave passed away June 29th. Dave and Bill were neighbors, colleagues, and best of friends. They shared a love of 6 meters, among many other things. Many times when my phone rang and Bill was on the other end of the line, he and Dave were holding high-level Newsline planning meetings in Dave's hot tub. Dave worked for Disney as a camera operator. Dave Bill and Dave Bell, W6AQ, also a recent Silent Key, worked together on several of the most recent ARRL ham radio films. Dave Booth was a good friend of Amateur Radio Newsline, and he will be greatly missed. And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at www.arnewsline.org. With Kent Peterson, KC0DGY, Jim Dameron, N8TMW, Stephen Kenford, N8WB, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe, I'm Don Wilbanks, AE5DW. 73. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation.